All right, guys, welcome to episode 3 of Inside the Huddle here on the Inside the Huddle YouTube page. And we've got Coach Dean Adams with us today. Panthers took it on the chin Friday night against Fordyce, and in non-conference games, Coach, you're going to have games like that, to challenge your team and get them tested for conference play.
Yeah, hopefully not. But, we just played bad. It was a bad game. We didn't do we had a lot of miscommunication up front and with our running backs offensively, and we didn't play very well. And we bounced back this week. We've had 2 days of two great practices getting ready for Poen, but that, after last Friday night, that don't sit well with you as a coach. And so we got to move on from that and get better. But I expected a lot different ball game than we played Friday night, so I was disappointed in that.
Yeah, most definitely. But, moving on to this week, you've got arguably the most circled game on every, kid's schedule around here, with it being the backyard brawl. How do you look at that game from a football standpoint and from a community standpoint?
Well, it's just nice, playing someone so close. Me growing up in Fordyce, we played Rising, and I think that game goes back to 1950. And it was right down the road, man, and it was almost like you felt like you were at home, but it was still hostile. There was never an open seat in the house 30 minutes before the game. And, being here at Poen's a similar distance from like that for me. So, the kids get excited. They all know each other. And so they get excited. That shouldn't be something I have to do. I shouldn't have to steal excitement in them and motivate them. They should have that within their self. But we've got to, it don't matter who we play. Yeah, seriously. And people think I'm, when I say this, it don't matter if it's Fordyce or Poen. If we play like we did last week, we're not beating anybody. And we have to fix. We have fixed it this week, but that was pretty bad up front on offense and defensively. We got 3 stops like I asked them to get, and we couldn't move the ball on offense. Fordyce had the ball a ton last Friday night, but moving on to Poen, man, we got to shake that off and move forward. And I look forward. I'm excited about it. I feel good about the game this week. I feel good about our players, how they feel about it out there at practice. They're excited. They're flying around, and it's neat when you play people like that because, we'll be preparing in the practice, going over personnel and, defensively having a defensive practice, and they'll line up in something and we'll move our defense and line up a certain way. And they'll be like, hey, that's where so-and-so lines up. We know him, or Bo Batchelor, the kid that moved from Magnet Cove to Poen, he plays right here. Don't let him catch a ball on you, and stuff like that. So they're excited about it and stuff like that. They don't mean disrespect. They're out there, they're trying. I like the self motivation, and those guys are friends with each other and they play each other in basketball and baseball, and so they look forward to it. And I think the community comes out and supports it. It's always a big crowd for that game since I've been here. And I think both sides get excited about it. It's a good matchup for, similar size schools and getting after it. And now that's all, you got to put all that behind you and you go out there and win the ball game, execute and do what you're supposed to do. But we're super excited about Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, just the Poen game in general always is something to look forward to. But, Barrett, is going to have his team ready. Obviously, he always does with Colt at quarterback. They've been looking to throw the ball a little bit more this year. How do you really evaluate Poen as a team?
Oh, as a team, man, I'll say this, and what they do such a good job as coaches over there. I really can't brag about them enough, which I like them. Personally, they're good guys. They're good people. They teach their kids to be good people and play with class, and I really like that about them. But they coach them up, and speaking of throwing the ball, the films we got, they didn't have to throw it a whole lot. They ran down Cutter's throat all night. They just ran the ball against Cutter, and they didn't have to throw it a whole lot. And that's a testament to them up front doing what they're supposed to do and being well coached. And they and then the same thing for the previous week against Mountain Pine. They only played a half of football that week, but they did throw it a little bit. But they also had success running the football on the ground, and they're coached up to do what they do. Their defense, they're not gonna get beat by alignment. They're gonna be lined up where they're supposed to be, and they're gonna put their defense in a position to make a few stops, and They're just well coached, and so they're a solid team, and that gets me even more excited, And just now it comes down to who executes better. Here we go, and who's going to execute better, win the ball game Friday night, and so on. But no, Colt Barrett's a good player. They got a good running back that runs tough. Their O line, they do what they're coached to do, man. It's just sound football, and so I can't say enough about the job they do over there at Poen.
Yeah, most definitely. But man, it ought to be a good one Friday night. The Backyard Brawl is at Poen this year, so make this short trip over to Poen Friday night for the Backyard Brawl. And I appreciate your time today, Coach.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, guys, welcome to episode 3 here on season 2 of Inside the Huddle. And our guest this week is a man that does a little bit of everything, writes about just about anything sports-wise in Arkansas, and that is Mr. Kyle Sutherland. How you doing today, Kyle?
Dalton, I'm doing great, man. Definitely in the routine of football season, 2 weeks in. It's kind of like robotic by this point. I think you've figured that out as you've kind of gotten into this, that for 16, 17 weeks, you do one thing on a certain day, and then you get to Friday, you play the game, and then you start it all over again. So that's where we're at right now, and I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah, man, loving every second of it is true. You get this, record on Tuesday, record on Wednesday, edit on Thursday, upload Thursday, and then cover a whole nother game Friday. So it's like you said, it is the robotic. But man, we had some very interesting games last week. There was some good games, and you were over at I guess it was the small town showdown of the entire state, where Junction traveled up to Carlisle, and Carlisle imposed their will in the second half, tanked that one. What were your overall thoughts on that game?
Yeah, we were wondering how Junction would respond because they struggled against Camden Harmony Grove OC, as they're now known, a team that's had their number over the past 5-6 years. But I think that they were just maybe a little bit overlooking them, as we saw, and they came into the Carlisle game and really started off really well. Now it was 7-6 Junction at halftime, so they had scored on a Dominique Grimes touchdown run, and Carlisle they couldn't quite get a rhythm going. They've got a really good freshman quarterback in Ty Tanksley that was just playing his second varsity game and trying to get his feet wet still. But he really settled in towards the back end of the second quarter and then just really took off in the second half, played a great game. He had a touchdown on the ground and through the air. But really, Junction City they struggled to get anything going other than Dominique Grimes. He's probably the fastest man in Class 2A. When he gets just a decent block and he's able to get through the hole and get to the second level, nobody's going to catch him. So without him, they're probably getting beat 41-0 because he scored all 3 of their touchdowns. So, if it goes by that narrative, then they would get shut out. But I think Carlisle, yes, they did show 2A that they are the team to beat right now, very early into the season. But I also don't think that it's time to panic if you're Junction City. Yes, they've got some issues, but I think they are fixable issues. When you've got that much talent, you can figure some things out. So really now it's up to Coach Devin Ball and his staff to figure out, okay, where does this piece go if it's not working right here? Because they got another really tough matchup. It's kind of an underrated matchup against Smackover this week. Mitchell Polk, the quarterback from El Dorado, came over to Smackover and is a great player. So it's not going to get any easier in conference play either. So I do think that Junction can right this ship. But, yes, there is some things that are concerning at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously, that's why you schedule those tough non-conference games, is to find those holes that you can patch and fix before conference play. But, if you just move up one classification, it'll start at 2A and we'll eventually get to 7A. But there were some big games in 3A. Everybody had a lot of eyes on the Conway Christian Equipment matchup. Maybe thought Quitman could challenge Conway Christian offensively, but Conway Christian, their quarterback, really showed out in that one. And then Bismarck at Mineral. I thought Mineral would do a little bit better athletically in that game, honestly. But Bismarck and Coach Keithley just came out and was firing on all cylinders, Kyle.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Bismarck is certainly a team to keep an eye on. I do think that right now, as far as state title contender, because, the media can look ahead as far as that goes. I know the teams are not, but to me right now it's a 3-horse race between Prescott, Booneville, and who was the other one? Newport. I couldn't think of it. So I think it's probably a three-headed race right there. But then you think about the Rivercrest, the Walnut Ridges, the Salems, and of course Bismarck has entered that conversation this year. They won, what was it, 9 or 10 games last year, something around that range, and they had a lot coming back. So Bismarck is definitely a team to be reckoned with. But as Bismarck has taken that trend up in 3A, Mineral Springs has taken that trend down as of late to me, because they were 9-0 last year. They fell in that game to Murfreesboro in the conference championship in week 10, which incredible atmosphere. I was there that night. And then they got upset in the playoffs, and then they come out and just have a really bad showing in their opening game. So again, I know it was against quality competition, but I mean, to give up that many points, I mean, that's really just inexcusable for the amount of talent that they have. So another deal right there is I think that Mineral Springs is going to be just fine. Jason Hathcock's done a great job there, but they do have some things to prove after really just a poor showing in their opening performance.
Yeah, and I really, I thought Mineral, like you said, would put up more of a competition athletic wise. But giving up 62 points is kind of I I
It's
guess you
inexcusable. You can
yeah,
say it.
I mean it is. It is. That's quite a few touchdowns. But one other game that was played Thursday night at Hendricks, the Salem and Prescott game, I wasn't able to go to that game, but I heard that Salem had the lead for a little while, and then Prescott and Coach Glass came storming back.
Yeah, so I think it was 22-10 at half. Of course, Thursday night I was keeping up with the NFL game. I was keeping, I cover a little. I've kind of dipped my toes in some Division II football, so I was covering some of those season openers that our in-state teams were playing in. But I was, of course, also following this one. It was streamed on Facebook, and yeah, Salem really came out, and Coach Josh Watson's done a really underrated good job to me, especially last year. They had that double-digit win season, I think, for the first time in like a decade or a little bit over a decade, and they came out and showed they weren't scared of Prescott, and the Curly Wolves ended up coming back and won the football game. But another thing about Salem is they are really challenging themselves by not only scheduling that game, but now they turn around and play Newport, who to some is the favorite in 3A right now. So that's the thing about Salem. They're not going to back down to anybody. I really like what they've done up there. So I would certainly put them maybe in that sleeper category right now, but certainly a team to watch as we go down the stretch in 3A. That's, always a very competitive class.
Yeah, and like you mentioned the three-headed race earlier, you have the main the people of the three-head and those teams, but there could be a lot of teams that are on the verge of being a sleeper team, and if they get seeding is to go their way or something of that nature within playoffs, come November, they really could make a run, Kyle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all about seeding. You look at last year, and Mansfield had a great season, went on that run, and they made it to the semifinals. And we've seen plenty of times where teams have just got hot in a matchup. And this happens in all classifications, of course, but where a team gets hot and it's a bad matchup for maybe a higher seed that did a lot better in the regular season. But yeah, Class 3A, like I said, past that three-headed monster is, or I shouldn't say I call it a three-headed monster, but more of a three-headed race. But definitely three of the monsters in that class for sure. But the 3A3 is one to really watch. Of course, Hoxie is always kind of a sneaky one. I don't know that they're quite on the level of maybe the Walnut Ridges or the Rivercrest right now. But then also, too, you've got Newport, as I've said. I mean, that some consider the favorite when Amoni Wren comes back, and then also Keandre Barker. You add those two athletes to what's already a super athletic team, you've got a recipe for success. So, yeah, Bismarck is also in that category. I think Fordyce is maybe a super sleeper right now, maybe on that outside looking in as far as teams that could just get better and continue improving as the season goes along. But, yeah, right now, as far as maybe the top three, I would definitely say Newport, Prescott, and Boonville are my favorites.
I would definitely have to agree with that. But if you move up to 4A, the big matchup last week was Arkadelphia, taking care of Hot Springs pretty handily. I thought that game would really be a lot closer. And then, Elkins shutting out Dardanelle. I don't know what exactly Coach Vega has up there, but I didn't expect Dardanelle to get shut out by Elkins either.
I think that was where I was at. I think Elkins certainly was picked by just about everyone to win that game, but to do what they did to Dardanelle, you start with Creed Vega, the quarterback, of course, Coach Vega's son, and he rushed for over 1,000 yards last year, passed for over 2,000, so he's certainly one of the top juniors in the state, and he's proven that. And they've got a couple of others that I've heard about. I know they got a receiver that's very rangy, and there's a few other skill players to discuss, and I know they've got one media days that his name's slipping my mind. But as far as just like what Elkins, I think many expected Elkins to take a step back because you lost so much offensive production, but they've really done well. We're also, of course, going to get a great matchup and see exactly where they are, and also maybe where Warren is when they square off in Russellville this week. You look at the Warren squad that they lost their quarterback in week 1. You put Cam Burks, who had been playing actually. I think he played a little receiver, but he was mostly on defense. But he's passed for 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games. So 3 touchdowns each. So Warren is just continuing to click on all cylinders. No surprise there. But, I mean, also Arkadelphia, like you said, they played a complete game against Hot Springs. So that was obviously really big. But, I mean, I think that they were probably a little bit ahead of schedule right there because last year, they lost a good bit on offense and then still continued to click once they got into conference play. But their defense is obviously going to be the strength of their team this year. I think that Coach Shucker has made a big point about that. But Elkins and Warren on Friday is going to be a really big measuring stick to me of probably maybe who the top 2 teams are in the state. But, again, you also got to give, I think, Arkadelphia respect. But that's going to be a big measuring stick as we go into conference play of who the team is to beat early on, maybe, through the first third of the season.
Yeah, that game will, I think, answer a lot of questions because, Elkins likes to put points up on people, but can they hold somebody defensively as athletic as Warren? And I think vice versa.
That's
also
exactly it. They're those D-backs against all those receivers. Exactly right.
That one definitely will be a good one. But moving up to 5A, obviously some people, not including me, thought, Maumelle might could challenge Parkview, but we got that question answered in the second half of that game Friday. And then Pine Bluff had a game against Dallas Kimball, Texas. That one, are you worried about Pine Bluff, them starting 0-2?
So I actually covered that game. I called it. We did it on the Natural State Sports Network, and I will say that their defense is going to win them some games. They're going to have one of the better defenses in 5A, and they've had 2 very good opponents to start the season. Of course, Millwood, Oklahoma, and then, as you said, Kimball, Texas. But they like to use multiple quarterbacks. Last year, Landon Holcomb was the guy just because, he solidified that he was the guy and proved that. But their sophomore quarterback was injured about midway through the first quarter or like early in the second, somewhere around there. And he came back in, but his ankle just wasn't nearly as effective. So really, once Kimball understood that they were going to have to pretty much be one-dimensional, they really just clamped down on defense. And the Pine Bluff defense made some great plays, but just – it really got to the point that when their offense just couldn't put any points on the board, they got a little bit gassed, I think. But I think that even though they're playing in a really tough conference, I still think that they're going to compete for a playoff spot. They're going to get better as the season goes along. They're just trying to figure out a lot. When you lose a D1 quarterback plus 2 SEC signees at wide receiver, you're obviously going to be finding some answers. So they're just really in a point where they're trying to gel right now. But, talking about Parkview and Maumelle, I'll say something there real quick is Coach Bolding, I talked to him, Coach Brad Bolding, and he said at halftime when it was 9-0, I think it was, Parkview, that he just felt like his guys weren't meshing, that things just weren't. They were kind of just out there, he didn't say this, but more so I took it as they were kind of just lollygagging around. So he got after them pretty good at halftime, and then they came out and did what they do. But I think Maumelle's still going to be a contender. They did get all those transfers in, but they're also trying to mesh. They've got 2 young quarterbacks that are very talented, but they're trying to figure out their way there. They've run a 2-platoon with Andrew Bjork and Levi Warrior. But I think, too, that you have to think about is Parkview is used to playing in the big games when the lights are the brightest, when there's a lot of pressure on them. Maumelle is not used to that. This was their first test, and they did pretty well for a half, but then it just fell off in the second half. So I think as the season goes along that Maumelle is going to get more accustomed to that. And, once they get to Joe T. Robinson in week 10, I think they'll be more ready for a big game like that.
Yeah, most definitely. And then a lot of people, one more glance at 5A. A lot of people, I guess, the I don't know if hypiest is a word, but the team probably with the most, media hype is Sheridan, and they went to Lakeside, and Lakeside took care of them. Coach Kelly down there. How do you really evaluate a team that has, that much hype, and now is 1-1 after that big Lakeside loss?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly to answer the question on the Lakeside side of it, I certainly think that they're up there as one of the top 3 contenders, maybe top 2 in 5A right now, just with what they've shown. Now, Sheridan is, let's call it what it is. Sheridan has been a bit overhyped this year, and that's not any kind of knock on the Yellow Jackets. But, Coach Kelly has proven himself. He's one of the most successful coaches to ever walk the sidelines in Arkansas. But, I mean, let's call it what it is. They just have probably gotten a little bit more hype than they would, because they didn't get that under Larry McBroom, who was also an 8-time state champion from Oklahoma. So I think that Sheridan has improved vastly as far as their culture, as far as probably going to be able to finish some games that maybe they haven't last year or in years past. But I think probably one of the things that we don't need to do is put them in a top 5 category right now. And I think, I'm not trying to speak for him, but I think Coach Kelly would probably agree with that. And I know they're not this week, but I know that was some of the conversations that I'd heard on radio shows and all these different things last week. And, while I respect everyone's opinion, I can't get on board with that just yet. But now that I did spew out some negativity there, I will also reiterate that I really love what Coach Kelly has done there already. And they've gotten all kinds of attention to the program. There's a lot of seats that are in the butts that are or a lot of butts in the seats that are coming to watch these football games. So I think Sheridan is certainly on the up and up. I do think they're a playoff team this year. I just don't think that they are a 5A or a 6A contender, as some have put them in that category already.
Yeah, and I think they could be a contender, but I think they also have to prove themselves. And
Absolutely.
when
Yeah.
you have Kelly as a coach, you have the ability.
Anything can happen.
Yeah,
I played against him, and anything can happen for sure.
But moving up to 7A, one game that I really found very interesting was Shiloh coming down to Little Rock Christian. That one tied at the end. The touchdown there right at the end by the Saints ended that one 44-40. What did you see from both of those schools in that competition?
Well, it was back and forth. I noticed that Little Rock Christian, that was one of the ones that I was following as we were calling the Carlisle Junction game. And it was like Little Rock Christian would get ahead and they would pull, a 2-score lead out, and then Shiloh would respond. And we've seen that a lot from Shiloh when they've been down. They never quit until the final whistle, and that's just continued under Tucker Barnard in year 2. But this was the year that it was like, okay, what is it going to be like? Last year, people were wondering what was going to happen at quarterback with Eli Wisdom out. And, they had some injuries and had to do a couple of different things there. This time around, you lose Bo Williams, who was a dynamic running back, did so many things for you, also played linebacker. Who was going to take over for him? Well, Griffin Mason is leading that charge. He's had a great first 2 games. Their offensive line, which that's one thing I've mentioned many times that I love about Shiloh. They always put out their stats, or a lot of different times they'll put out their stats on their pancakes. And I know that they had 11 against Little Rock Christian. The team had over 350 yards rushing. And so that's the main thing that I think I've taken out of this game. I think that Little Rock Christian is going to be just fine. They're still going to compete, even though they're in 7A now, just like I think PA will. But their run defense, Little Rock Christian's run defense, has been exposed in the last 2 games against Shiloh Christian. So how will they respond? Because they got shredded by Bo Williams for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. Probably the best performance in high school football that I've ever seen in person. And also this time around, they get shredded for 350 yards in a combined effort. So I think that's probably where the Warriors are really going to have to pick up the pieces. It's like, okay, we just got gashed here. We cannot let this happen again.
Yeah, and it's crazy, defensively they will definitely have to figure something out. But moving on to cap off week 1, which is the second game, week 0. I never know the point of it. But you have a lot of out-of-state competition. Fayetteville went over to Broken Arrow, Bryant on the road at Christian Brothers. Pulaski at Madison Rizon in Mississippi. all of those games were good games, and all the Arkansas schools came out on top in those out-of-state games.
Yeah, they did really well. I know that, the Springdale Harbor and Farmington game, there was like 115 or 125, something like that, combined points. There was some high scoring. Then you had the 30-23 game that Fayetteville won over Broken Arrow. And like you said, the Bryant game against Christian Brothers was really interesting because Bryant, from what I gathered, they had a bus that broke down. And so that was like at 6:37 in the morning. Then they made the 6-hour trip up to St. Louis after they had gotten another bus. They played the game and played obviously really well. Just look at the score. And then they come back home that night. That's what's crazy is just they did all this in one day. Had just a crazy start that was probably pretty frustrating. Then they take care of business. I guess they took care of Christian Brothers because of all that frustration and then come back home. So they've got a really big one against Parkview this week that I think is going to measure. There's many people that would probably say that Bryant and Parkview, along with Greenwood, I think that's probably the most three that I hear about as far as the number one overall team in the state. We're going to figure a lot out, at least as far as that question in the early stages of the season, and that game this week at War Memorial between Parkview and Bryant. But yeah, overall, 7A, I think that, of course, the big one was Conway and Bentonville. That was one that a statement was made to me by Conway. They just really poured it on Bentonville. So still a lot to figure out, but I think the normal favorites right now, Fayetteville, Bryant, and then with Conway right behind them, to me, is probably your favorites in that class.
Yeah, I would have to totally agree with that. But if you shift over to week 2, there are some good matchups. Obviously, the Bryant at Parkview matchup is the cherry on top of the cake with the icing involved, and we'll save that one for the very end. But you've got some other decent ones. Scrolling through the class, obviously the Elkins and Warren matchup in 4A is going to be big. And then one that, like you mentioned, Salem at Newport earlier, I think that one would be good. And then Perryville at Bigelow, Perryville being in the conference that I cover the most, them losing to Atkins in week 0, 25-24 was kind of a question mark. You didn't really know, and then they come out and they drop 50 on Hector. Now, I do not know how good Hector is, but I would be curious to see if the Panthers can hold up against the Mustangs Friday night.
Yeah, Hector's always kind of one of those that I think they did lose a good bit. I don't know a ton about them, but I know that every year they're at least competitive. Of course, they had the upset over Mineral Springs in the first round of the playoffs last year, but that definitely, I know that Mayflower is pretty good. That's another one that I forgot to mention in 3A to at least watch out for, but I was a little bit shocked that Mayflower beat Bigelow 35-0. So that's the biggest question. I know Bigelow lost a bunch, and I'm not shocked that Mayflower won. I just didn't expect it to be by that kind of margin, and then for Bigelow not to score any. But the biggest question for Bigelow is will they respond from this, or will they let that game beat them twice, or will Perryville just continue doing what they've done? Because I think that Perryville's got a formidable squad that can maybe compete for that final playoff spot, or maybe even a little bit higher if things go their way. But that is an interesting one because you're really just wondering whether Perryville will continue, to build off of what it has done, or also if Bigelow will be able to rebound.
Yeah, I think that's the question to be answered. And then you look at, Salem at Newport. That one got a little hype around it. Salem coming off the Prescott game, and then Newport coming off the Batesville game. What do you take of that one?
Yeah, I like it. That's also kind of the case with Salem. Now, they didn't obviously have the same kind of game that I mentioned with Bigelow getting shut out, but it's kind of the same scenario is, okay, well, you had that lead on Prescott. Are you going to let that game beat you twice because you almost beat what many consider is the top team in Class 3A, or what some at least, I guess maybe more so than many, it's some now that Newport has had their rise. But that's the thing. You've got the chance this week to beat the other team that many consider the favorite. So I think that Coach Watson's going to have his guys ready. I do like Newport in this game just because I think that they have too many weapons to cover. If you key on Keandre Barker, then Monty Wren is going to shred you. If you key on him, then one of the other two is going to shred you. So there's just so many that you have to account for, and I don't know if there's anybody in Class 3A, maybe other than Prescott because they have so much speed, just like Newport does. You look at their track program, and a lot of those guys play in football as well. So I think that probably if anybody's going to match speed with Newport, it's going to be Prescott in Class 3A.
Yeah, most definitely. And then obviously the key matchup, like you discussed earlier, is Elkins at Warren. That game being played in Russellville, Arkansas Tech. And then I guess we can talk about the Jim Dandy of them all. You know, Bryant goes to War Memorial for the second time this season already. And they play arguably the best team in the entire state, in my opinion, the Parkview Patriots.
No doubt. Yeah, Parkview they're on a 27-game win streak, and it's kind of funny because this time last year, Bryant was on a 54-game in-state win streak, and then Parkview ended that one 28-27. But I think that this is going to be another one of those matchups where both the defenses are probably going to play pretty well. There's going to maybe be a big play here or there that's going to happen, but it's going to come down to who makes a big defensive turnover, or in the case that we saw last year, maybe a special teams play. Jermaine Penny, that in my opinion is probably the most underrated player on this Parkview team other than Jace White, but Jace just came over from North Little Rock this season. But Jermaine had that kickoff return for the touchdown last year, and he's got about 4.3 speed. He's committed to Northwest Missouri State, and he's going to be playing cornerback. He'll probably play some offense as well, and then, of course, he's going to be back there returning punts and some kicks as well. So I think that maybe a player like that is maybe the X factor. That Money Elston and Amarian Robinson and all these guys, they're going to get theirs, but it's maybe that unheralded player that might make that unheralded play like we saw last year that might be the difference in this one.
Yep, that one will be a very, very good one. But, Kyle, that is going to wrap it up here, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking some high school football with me.
Absolutely, Dalton. Anytime. Appreciate you.
All right, you have a good one, and have fun covering that Bryant Parkview game this week.
I will do it. You can catch it on 103.7 The Buzz.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later.
See you.
All right, guys, that right there was Kyle Sutherland, a man that covers a lot, and that will wrap it up for episode 3 here on season 2 of Inside the Huddle. Want to give my sponsors one more shout out: Hartzell's Farms and Excavating and Razorback Camper Sales. Be sure to check those sponsors out because they are the people that bring you the show. And that will do it, and I will see y'all next week.